He ran through the dense alien forest, his breath coming in short gasps as he tried to stay ahead of her footsteps, echoing through the misty woods behind him. Every branch he brushed against, every leaf he stepped on, felt like it amplified his presence, announcing to her exactly where he was. He knew he was outmatched, but something in him refused to stop. She was coming closer. He could feel it, her presence like a shadow creeping closer, inch by inch. The stories about her were enough to haunt any man, yet here he was experiencing the terrifying reality firsthand. He didn't know why she had targeted him out of all the humans wandering this world, but he understood one thing. She wouldn't stop until she had him. This alien huntress had a reputation not just for her skill, but for her relentless nature, her refusal to let any quarry escape her. Rumors of her had spread across human outposts, tales of her skill, her beauty, and her ferocity in the hunt. But it wasn't until now, as he stumbled through the undergrowth hearing her close behind, that he realized how real those stories were. A faint glow appeared ahead, an opening in the dense canopy of trees revealing a sliver of moonlight on a patch of open ground. If he could just reach it, maybe he'd find a place to hide somewhere she couldn't follow. His legs ached with every step, but he pushed forward, the thought of freedom driving him onward. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he couldn't stop now, not when he was so close. He could see the light breaking through the darkness, a symbol of hope in this unforgiving forest. But as he stepped into the clearing, he froze. She was already there, standing in the moonlight, her figure illuminated by the soft, silvery glow. She was taller than he had imagined her posture, both graceful and powerful, her every movement exuding confidence and control. Her skin shimmered in the moonlight, a mesmerizing shade that seemed to shift with the light, and her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him feel as though she could see into his very soul. For a moment he was too stunned to move, her beauty captivating him even as fear pulsed through his veins. "Running won't save you," she said, her voice soft yet carrying an undeniable authority. Her lips curved into a faint smile, as if amused by his futile attempts to escape. She took a step closer, her movements smooth and controlled, each one bringing her closer to him. He took a step back, his heart pounding, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. But he knew deep down that there was no escaping her now. She had him exactly where she wanted him. He forced himself to speak, his voice shaky as he met her gaze. "Well, what do you want from me?" he asked, barely managing to keep his voice steady. Her smile widened, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. She tilted her head, examining him as though he were an interesting specimen she had never encountered before. The air around them was thick with tension, the quiet of the forest amplifying the intensity of the moment. "Humans," she murmured, as if testing the word on her tongue, her voice soft and almost playful. "So fragile, so unique?" She reached out her hand, brushing it along his arm, her touch surprisingly gentle. He felt a shiver run through him, her touch sending a jolt through his senses. She wasn't just hunting him. She was studying him, observing his every reaction with a curiosity that seemed to go beyond mere interest in a quarry. He swallowed hard, his mind racing as he tried to understand her intentions. Was she planning to capture him as a trophy, or was there something more behind her actions? Her gaze lingered on him, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that was both unsettling and oddly compelling. In that moment, he realized that she wasn't just a hunter. She was something far more dangerous and intriguing. After what felt like hours of walking through the forest with her leading the way, he found himself standing before a structure hidden among the trees. It was built into the side of a rocky cliff, its entrance partially concealed by vines and moss. The walls were adorned with alien symbols that glowed faintly, casting an eerie light across the entrance. She gestured for him to step inside, her expression unreadable as she observed his reaction. He hesitated, glancing back at the forest, but he knew he had no choice. The interior of the lair was dimly lit, the walls lined with intricate patterns and carvings that seemed to pulse with energy. Strange artifacts were arranged on shelves, each one radiating a subtle glow that illuminated the room in a soft, ethereal light. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, a mixture of earth and something distinctly alien. He could feel her presence behind him, her gaze unwavering as she watched him take in his surroundings. She guided him to a stone ledge near the center of the room, gesturing for him to sit. He complied, his mind racing with questions as he tried to make sense of the situation. She moved with a quiet confidence, her every gesture deliberate and controlled. He realized that this was her domain, a place where she held all the power. Whatever she wanted from him, he was at her mercy here. "You must be wondering why I brought you here." she said, her voice breaking the silence. There was a softness to her tone that caught him off guard, a hint of vulnerability beneath her steely exterior. He nodded, unable to find his voice, his heart still racing as he tried to process everything that had happened. Her gaze softened as she studied him, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something he couldn't quite define. "Humans," she began, her voice trailing off as if searching for the right words. "You are different from what I expected." Her hand brushed against his arm, her touch lingering as if she was savoring the sensation. He felt his pulse quicken, her proximity awakening something within him that he hadn't felt before. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a warmth in her gaze, a hint of admiration, that made him feel strangely at ease. He looked into her eyes, trying to understand her intentions, but her gaze remained inscrutable, a mystery he couldn't hope to unravel. She leaned closer, her face inches from his, her expression intense and focused. "I need someone strong," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who understands survival, and you, human, may be exactly what I've been searching for." Her words hung in the air, a mixture of invitation and challenge. He felt a surge of courage welling up within him, emboldened by her words. She wasn't just a huntress. She was looking for something more, something he couldn't yet comprehend. The tension between them was palpable, an electric charge that seemed to fill the room. He realized that he was no longer just her captive. He was something more, something that intrigued her. Days passed within her lair, each one blending into the next as he grew accustomed to her presence. She taught him about her world, her customs, the complex rituals that defined her people. She showed him artifacts that told stories of ancient battles, of alliances forged and broken, of triumphs and losses that shaped her species. And all the while, she watched him with a curiosity that bordered on fascination. He found himself drawn to her more with each passing day, captivated by her strength, her intelligence, and her undeniable beauty. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, a mixture of fierce independence and quiet vulnerability. In her presence, he felt both challenged and protected, as if she were both his adversary and his ally. One evening, as they sat by a small fire, her eyes softened, her gaze filled with a warmth he hadn't seen before. She looked at him, her expression thoughtful, as if she were weighing her words carefully. "You're more than I expected," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a tenderness in her tone, a hint of admiration that made his heart race. Without thinking, he reached out his hand, brushing against hers. She looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers intertwine with his, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they had forged. The warmth of her touch sent a jolt through him, awakening feelings he hadn't realized he was capable of. In that moment, the barriers between them faded. He was no longer just a human she had captured. He was someone she cared for, someone she trusted. The realization filled him with a sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of the bond they had formed. As the days turned into weeks within her lair, their bond grew deeper, unspoken but undeniably strong. He had learned more about her world and its ancient traditions. But there was still so much he didn't understand. She was a mystery wrapped in strength and beauty, her every movement filled with purpose. Yet there was a vulnerability in her gaze, a guarded softness that he glimpsed only in fleeting moments. One evening, as they sat in silence, she suddenly turned to him, her expression serious. "There is something you need to know," she said. Her voice steady but carrying an edge of hesitation. She reached into a small pouch at her side. Pulling out a thin, metallic object engraved with strange symbols, she held it up to him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge his reaction. "This is the mark of my people," she explained, her voice soft. "It's a symbol of loyalty and of sacrifice." She pressed the object into his hand, her fingers lingering against his as she did so. He could feel the warmth of her touch, her hand slightly trembling as she let go. The weight of her words settled over him, and he looked into her eyes, sensing the gravity of what she was sharing. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze softened, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her steely exterior. She took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the edge of the mark in his hand. "Because you're not just my prisoner, you're my partner," she murmured, her voice filled with an intensity that took him by surprise. "And I trust you." The admission hung between them, filling the air with an electric tension. He looked into her eyes, his heart racing as he processed her words. She was placing her trust in him, opening herself up in a way he hadn't expected. The walls she had built around herself were crumbling, and he could see the person beneath the fierce exterior. In that moment, He realized that he felt the same, a sense of loyalty, of protection, and something deeper. Just when he thought he understood her, an unexpected revelation shattered the fragile peace they had built. One evening, as they prepared for another journey into the depths of her world, a message arrived, a small, shimmering device carrying a communication from her superiors. She froze, her eyes narrowing as she read the holographic text that floated before her. "What's wrong?" he asked, sensing the tension radiating from her. She clenched her jaw, her gaze hardening as she looked away. They know about you," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "They've ordered me to return you to them immediately. They want to experiment on you, to understand what makes you different." He felt a chill run down his spine, the implications of her words sinking in. She had defied her own people to protect him, risking everything to keep him safe. And now, her loyalty was being tested in a way she hadn't anticipated. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and helplessness. "I won't let them take you," she said, her voice firm. "You're important to me." The vulnerability in her gaze was unmistakable, and he felt his heart ache at the thought of what she was willing to sacrifice for him. She had put herself in danger, going against her own people to protect a human, a choice that could cost her everything. Without thinking, he reached out, taking her hand in his. "We'll figure this out together," he whispered, his voice filled with determination. She looked at him, her expression softening as she squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. In that moment, he knew that they were in this together, no matter the cost. The final confrontation came sooner than they expected. As they made their way through the dense forest, her superiors tracked them down, surrounding them with a force that outnumbered them tenfold. She stood beside him, her posture tense, her gaze unwavering as she faced the ones she had once called allies. "You don't have to do this," one of them said, his voice filled with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "He's just a human. Why would you risk everything for him?" She looked at him, her expression fierce. "Because he's not just a human," she replied, her voice steady. "He's more—" She turned to him, her gaze softening as she met his eyes. In that moment, he felt a surge of courage, fueled by the connection they shared. She had chosen him, against all odds, and he wouldn't let her stand alone. Together, they fought side by side, their movements synchronized in a dance of survival. He was no longer just her captive, he was her equal, her partner in battle. As they faced their enemies, he realized that he would do anything to protect her, just as she had done for him. In the end, they emerged victorious, their enemies retreating into the shadows, defeated but not forgotten. She looked at him, a mixture of relief and pride in her gaze. They had survived, but they both knew that this was only the beginning of a new journey, a path they would walk together, bound by loyalty, trust, and something deeper. As they stood in the aftermath of the battle, he took her hand, a silent promise of the future they would face together. She looked at him, her lips curving into a soft smile, her eyes filled with a warmth that made his heart race. They had found something rare, something worth fighting for. And as they walked away from the battlefield, he knew that he had found his place, by her side, forever. As they journeyed through the now quiet forest, the weight of everything they had endured lingered in the air around them. They walked in silence, their hands clasped together, each step a reminder of the battles fought and the loyalty shared. The forest had transformed from a place of danger to a realm that held their memories of pursuit, fear, and ultimately, a bond that neither had anticipated. When they finally stopped to rest, the twilight cast a soft glow over the land, painting their surroundings in shades of purple and blue. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading light, her expression softened by an emotion he hadn't seen in her before, vulnerability mixed with something deeper, something that made his chest tighten and his heart race. "I never thought I'd feel this way," she murmured, her gaze dropping as though the admission was almost too much for her to bear. "My life was built around the hunt, around loyalty to my people and my mission. But then you came along, and everything changed." Her voice trembled slightly, a rare crack in her otherwise unbreakable resolve. He reached out, gently lifting her chin so her eyes met his. "You changed me too," he replied, his voice low and steady. "I didn't know what to expect when you first captured me. But I didn't expect this." His lips curled into a slight smile, one that she mirrored, her gaze softening as their faces drew closer. In that moment, he knew that their paths were forever entwined. bound by the shared experiences and silent promises they had made. As the stars began to emerge above them, they sat together, watching the sky in a peaceful silence. They had both been warriors, shaped by a lifetime of battles. But now they were something more, something neither had ever imagined. The huntress had found her equal, and he had found a partner he could stand beside in any storm. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the remnants of a world that had once been hostile, they shared a quiet, simple embrace, their fingers entwined as they looked toward the horizon. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, side by side. And as the stars lit their way forward, they knew this was not just the end of their journey. It was the beginning of a life they would carve out together, bound by loyalty, respect, and the kind of love that no enemy, no force, could ever tear apart.